Before we start today, I want to talk about my sponsor this quarter, Spec. Spec is also a leader in the fraud tool orchestration space with their patented Trust Cloud platform. This allows you to connect to any fraud vendor through a no-code implementation as well. Think of this as a single connection to a gateway that allows an instant connection to any tool that you might need without having to do an 18-month integration only to find out the tool wasn't what you wanted. You can run multiple POCs, answer new threats with the latest tool, and tweak your multi-layer approach literally at the click of a button. The Spec Trust Cloud lets you do this all yourself without having to bother your dev teams. Please check them out by visiting www.specprotected.com to learn how they have changed the fraud fighting game. And let's get into this episode. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of that Fraud Boxer podcast. You know you've been waiting for it. Today I have a pretty big treat in store for you guys today. We got a legend in the building with us right now. Well, virtually in the building. I got Alisdair Faulkner from Darwinium here today. How are you doing?
G'day, Jordan. Great to talk to you again, my friend. It was good catching you up at the Merchant Risk Council just recently in Vegas. So
Yeah.
great to be back.
I think you guys made quite a splash this year. As we were just doing our pre-show notes here, we kind of were talking about that. I had people coming up to me there asking about you guys and saying that you guys are one of their more innovative things that they've seen in a long time. So really excited to get you on here today to talk about that and what you guys are doing and how it's unique from what everybody else is doing and spread the message to those people that might have not really been there. So shall we start?
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. So you and I met, probably at least a decade ago, at least,
Mm.
probably even more than that. You were at a little tiny company that no one had ever heard of, right? Called Threatmetrix, that I think 1 in 2 people were using at that time. Yeah. So kind of run me through a little bit about that. I think I was on the advisory
Yeah,
board for a year there, but you have quite a big history with Threatmetrix, and you were instrumental in that product that a lot of us still use to this day. So can you kind of run us
yeah,
through
no,
that?
fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean, Threatmetrix was a great, great achievement. One of the things that I really enjoyed. So I was a co-founder there, and I ran products, was a chief products officer. And but one of the greatest things achieved was had a great financial outcome in terms of its acquisition by LexisNexis for investors and employees. But actually, the thing I was most proud of was we were protecting tens of millions of people's identities, from being used on a daily basis. 1 in every $3 spent online in the US, for example, Threatmetrix technology helps approve or accelerate, and over 1 billion, user accounts, including some of the largest banks and e-commerce sites in the world. So that was super gratifying, and when Threatmetrix, which was a pioneer in device technology or device intelligence, but then later became known as the digital identity company, using anonymous shared intelligence. And that was, one of the key reasons for LexisNexis acquisition. It was something that was global. They could see it was a big demand for their customers. But yeah, it's really gratifying to build something that is helping people's lives, because at the end of the day, building companies is really hard. And you want to have some motivation other than just the shares, which sometimes feel like just wallpaper in your toilet that may or may not be worth something.
It's funny, I was talking to another company this morning, just for my own purposes, and they were talking about how they're raising funds, but they're not really raising funds. Like if people want to invest, they're open to it, but they told me, and I thought it was really stuck out to me, is like they're making this company because they love what they're doing and not to like cash out and walk away. They're like even if we got acquired, we'd still want to be here and still work here. And I thought that really stuck with me this morning.
Certainly, and I think that's and that's certainly the case with Darwinium, and certainly was the case with Threatmetrix. Is that and any entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I always tell them that one of the key reasons we were successful was that we fell in love with the problem and not the solution. That it was back then, it was, anyone can attack from anywhere at any time, pretending to be anyone. And I saw the writing on the walls back at the foundations about 2006, when Threatmetrix was founded, where I could see that there was these networks, these IP addresses that were compromised, and they belonged to some of the world's largest networks, and that people were using it at that time. The primary attack, what they were doing was sending spam, and then it didn't take too much of a bright spark to put two and two together and go, hang on, if you can use this to send spam, then why wouldn't you be doing this en masse to pretend, for example, there's a compromised IP address in the US and you're somewhere in Russia, use that as a hop-off point to disguise your true kind of location and your true device identity. And so it was really kind of that hindsight of like, well, how do you solve this problem? And now with what's driving Darwinium, and our mission, as we say, survival of the unfittest, based on, Darwinium,
That's good.
Charles Darwin himself, and an evolutionary theory. But, how do we live in a world? How do we survive in a world where it will be increasingly, if not impossible, to differentiate between a synthetic interaction and a real human being? And then even, the question I like to ask the people is like, how is your current fraud and risk environment going to work when today the assumption is, bots and bots attacks are bad, and, your good customers, are human beings that you need to let through. But, in the world of Chat GPT now, that it can go do purchases on your behalf, and it can, go start, basically do anything you want, kind of like an Alexa or a Siri on steroids. How are you going to operate when your best customers are a chatbot, right? And it's not just, is it a good chatbot, is it a bad chatbot? Is that chatbot being used to commit fraud? How are we going to survive in that world? And your biggest threat is human bot farms. It's it turns the world on its head.
So I think that is a great preface to the things that we're about to talk about on this, because I mean, I even have some things that I could say when we get to it about more like the Chat GPT stuff, because I've been playing around with it quite a bit lately. But I think like obviously like you have a little bit of an accent, so you're calling in today from Bondi Beach over there in Australia, right?
Yeah, living the dream.
I think that is a dream location for a lot of people, I believe.
The only thing bad about it is the time zones for the rest of the world. But after Threatmetrix was acquired, I stayed in the US for a year helping with the transition, and they're very gracious and let me relocate back to Australia, for another year, and then. That was really just the beginnings, kind of sitting on the beach, eating too many chicken schnitzels and beers and meat pies, and
enjoying that post-acquisition life.
Yeah, that's right. I think people saw me and saw that I had maybe a little bit too much, but it was kind of necessary part of the process of building the next new thing. And as I said, I've always fell in love with the problem, and it's still what really concerned me was and a couple of things. One is just AI. And I think people's eyes have opened with ChatGPT for the first time.
100%. Like that completely changed the narrative, like almost overnight, about what AI is. Like it was a real world demonstration and application that was accessible to everybody. And everybody, like, it was no longer this thing that they think of like computer nerds programming in a lab somewhere. It was right there and anybody could use it.
And I've been talking a while, for anyone who would listen, it's about deep fakes and how AI, is basically obliterates, a lot of the things that we're rely on today. People's voice when they come in through a call center. You can synthetically copy anyone's voice with 20 seconds worth of audio. You can copy a video. You can create videos of folks just based on the data and the videos that are out there publicly. If you're someone who's phished a customer, and they're typing in their password, of course they're going to be able to synthetically replay or add sufficient noise, to get past keystroke biometrics. And so it really does blow apart a lot of the assumptions on which the foundations of which, fraud prevention has been built. And that's one of the key things that, and I'm worried about, in the sense that it's, geopolitically, we have entered into a new hot cold war from a cybersecurity perspective. I think the other piece that people have woken up, there's talk, say the US really needs its own dedicated, cyber warfare kind of division, like you have the Air, Sea, and Navy. And, that's for
Don't
good
forget
reason.
about Space Force. We got the Space Force too.
Yeah, that's right. That we are in a situation where we have adversaries, criminal crime gangs, and they both actually go hand to hand with many state-sponsored countries like North Korea, for example, where their job is to acquire everybody's identities in a country, to be able to create synthetic twins of those identities, to be able to create, we've seen misinformation. What we haven't really seen right now is full scale. Like back when Threatmetrix was started, I was looking at it and going, hey, one in every kind of 100 or so attacks were fraudulent, or payments were fraudulent. So it was a relatively single digit number. Of course, it varies depending on different industries. And I was like, what happens when it's actually, not, 5% of, stuff is bad? What if it's only 5% of stuff is good?
It's a lot of noise.
White noise, and that white noise, to begin with these bots are, certainly rudimentary and easy to understand and get around. But then, that white noise actually becomes, truly ChatGPT and others crawling through your website. And, one of the process of founding Threatmetrix and growing and working with some of the best customers in the world, and still, it's one of the preeminent fraud prevention solutions that's out there. Was one kind of use case which I think will help people land for fraud prevention folks whose executives or bosses are saying, what does it mean for us, and what should we do? Things like ChatGPT. So there was this little company called Yodely, and Plaid and others. We work with banks and others where they'd say, Threatmetrix is often deployed for risk-based authentication, at login by many organizations. And then so you have this choice of Yodely connecting in to collect data. And so at that point, because you were only seeing that login, you had a choice. Do we just let Yodely in, or do we block all of Yodely? And clearly, that's you let them in. So, but then what's the solution?
And they come in through that.
Yeah, exactly. So the same thing's going to happen, kind of like today, where you have bot detection folks who are specializing in like, hey, we need to be able to differentiate both good bot crawlers like Google and others, which help us with our traffic ranking, but we also need to keep the malicious stuff out. Now, that's not just going to be stuff browsing and searching your website. You're going to be having a choice of, if you don't have the right tools, do we let ChatGPT on or not? And of course, the answer to that's going to be absolutely, because
you want to be indexed.
And exactly. And actually, people who are going to be using ChatGPT are probably going to be the more affluent and the more advanced ones, are the customers, exactly the kinds of customers that you want. And so, what that means is this point in time checking, which is where the fraud prevention really is today for the majority of people. They call an API at authentication, or an API at payment, or an API at onboarding. And, and in many cases, you can kind of stitch some of those, bits of information together. But it's really in the gaps is where good customers are going to get caught in the net, and where fraud is actually going to still continue.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because if you look at it, like, if you think of it, like, it used to be like, you open up a port in like your router or something at home to try and let that little piece of traffic, like usually for like an Xbox, a PlayStation, or a streaming box through, but then like what happens when the bad stuff comes through that same port too, like they figure it out. There's like the port scanners and all that, but it's the same thing. Like we're doing some stuff now. I can't really talk about it in the public about what we're doing on our site, but it's the same thing as where we're going through we're looking at all of these connections that we have, and we see this massive amount of traffic coming through this one area, but then we see, well, it's marketplace traffic, so what we can't block it all, but it's the same thing like you're saying, is like now we have to scrutinize that specific traffic that's coming through that one connection, because there is noise in there too. But that gets to be a lot harder, because it looks like it's all coming from the same source. It's like, let's say you're a website that allows like reselling to Amazon, so then in theory, like you would have to have refunds come in through Amazon too. So if you might have plugged up all the refund plugging on like refund abuse on your own site, but if you use a marketplace to give you additional like 3PL authentications, like that's open to abuse too. And you're hoping that like they do something, but they're not. Amazon doesn't give a shit, like they just want the sales too.
I'm glad you brought up networking, actually, because I say that Darwinium is the company I've been building my entire life, or building upon.
You have said that to me a couple of times now over the years.
Yeah, and it's and because it's true. But part of that first journey, I did my master's engineering, and then I worked at Accenture, kind of doing SAP implementations for large manufacturing organizations, and then I co-founded a networking technology company called NetPrever. And, it was basically very similar insight for that first company. It was acquired by Expand Networks, an Israeli company that was in turn acquired by Riverbed, probably one of the preeminent kind of networking technology companies in the world. And essentially, the insight there was we'd roll out and kind of how that got started, and that will be relevant for the Darwinium kind of journey. We were talking to customers who are saying, "Hey, we've got SAP now. Everybody, is saying, hey, we've got enough database, we've got enough servers, it's performance." But when you talk to everybody in the branch network, so they'd say this is slow, it doesn't work. We don't know why, and everyone was pointing fingers and blaming each other. And so we invented this technology that effectively, it was like a router. It was actually a bridge, to use the technical term. They installed in your head office. And what it did was we had some packet scheduling, which meant that we could prioritize latency sensitive applications over others. So, what was happening in these branch networks is they had plenty of CPU, plenty of servers, but someone was downloading something, or they were using a peer-to-peer application, and then their voice over IP or their critical application would kind of go offline. And so that was my first kind of insight into, you needed ways of being able to inspect that traffic, get visibility, then be able to put policies in place which could provide the right amount of access. So it was really kind of, that was the very beginning. And then at Threatmetrix, actually, how we started was as an IP reputation. So that got acquired. And then, I met David Jones, and we had a mutual acquaintance who was a board member. And, like, what are you up to, Dave? And he's like, well, I want to build an IP reputation company. And I'm like, that's super interesting. The only problem is no one wanted to buy it, in the sense that, we'd go to, large merchants and we'd say, hey, look, we've got this intelligence on, say, for example, we saw this IP address sending spam. This should be helpful to you when you're trying to make a fraud decision. Shall we, accept this transaction? And they were like, yeah, can you come back when you've solved the AOL problem? We're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, all of these transactions come from the same IP address, and so, yeah, a lot of bad stuff comes from it too, but the majority of it's good. And it's the same problem with the Chat GPT analogy. If it's doing transactions on your website, it's just not just good or bad. You have to have better fidelity. And so that's when we came up with some unique approaches. We pioneered device intelligence, device fingerprinting. There were others at the time, and credit to 41st Parameter and Iovation were slightly ahead of us at the time. We soon eclipsed them, but they were definitely pioneers in their own right. And then, it was using that ability, that and other kinds of networking technologies or techniques that I'd kind of acquired over my experience, if you like, doing things like packet fingerprinting, understanding that device, how it's connecting to you. That was really kind of part of the signal intelligence. Proxy piercing was a big part of that, actually.
Yeah, I utilized that heavily. Yeah. And I remember playing with that when you guys were using that back at my time at Fandango. Like you guys did have some really, really forward thinking things that we could use. And it was really, it seemed overwhelming at the time, but once you were able to peel back the layers and understand what it did and how to use it, like the intelligence that you got on a device, because nobody knew what we were really doing, to their devices yet. And I remember I had this Chinese fraud group that had set up, it was a triangulation scheme, just super typical triangulation scheme. They had their own website, and then they would actually take people, put credit cards in and buy tickets from them. And then they would use stolen credentials to buy them from me and fulfill their orders. And then if that person didn't come back in a reasonable enough time, they'd steal their credit card information, start using that to make the purchases. But I remember it was just so easy to find them because of all the crazy stuff you guys were doing. And then they started using the proxies and all that. And how pulling those through and figuring it out, they could not ever figure out how I was ever doing it. And they started actually putting my name in the email addresses, they're trying to cuss me out while they're making purchases. But I actually will say that you guys helped me solve a couple of crimes using that software too, that people did serious jail time from my side alone. Using data from Threatmetrix.
We got to help in getting out of the whack-a-mole kind of mode. Actually, one of the things I'm proud of is one of the largest cybercrime prosecution in the UK was done leveraging some of Threatmetrix intelligence under the hood. So, nothing makes me feel more prouder, getting out of bed knowing that you help keeping people safe. And that's actually kind of relevant again. to this, device fingerprinting. It was a new approach. Was interesting in that journey where we had to really pioneer and go, fraud was typically used to just getting what they got, from the rest of the organization, was typically IP address and data, and it was a new thing for both, and it was hats off to the fraud prevention professionals who saw the value of it, who had to say, hey, IT, can you embed these web tags or, SDKs in a mobile device, for example, because this is the intelligence that we need. So, people take that for granted today, but, there are some real innovators like yourself and others that really set the course for the rest of the industry. And kind of where Threatmetrix was back in 2008, 2009, actually was 2009 was our first merchant risk council. Is exactly where Darwinium is today, where you have early adopters and folks who are seeing the promise and seeing that the way we're doing things is like fighting with our hands tied behind our backs. There's got to be a better way. And I'd say of all the companies that I talk with, and at the Merchant Risk Council, it was just overwhelmed with the response. From the message and the quality of and hats off to the team for the quality job that they did there. But every organization I talk to has these three problems. The first is they've deployed one of everything. They've got some bot detection, they've got some they've got some risk-based authentication.
Well, we've been talking multi-layers for 10 years. We've been saying we need to buy one of everything. And I think that this future and is orchestration. I do think that the future is orchestration. So I think that anything that plays into that orchestration piece is going to be, now whether that be all the things or whether that be one or two of the things is to be seen. But yeah.
So you're right. But the problem is that the layers don't have that connectivity tissue to actually understand and piece together the whole user's journey across web, mobile apps, and APIs. Like, apps are way more complex than they were in the past. And just so having a touch point on the web or a touch point on the mobile, or the APIs, you need to have that full visibility. So they've got, they've deployed one of everything, and unfortunately, good customers are still getting caught in the net, and bad guys are still getting through. The second problem that they have is that, and I'd say along with that, many of these customers have a motivation to outsource fraud. So maybe they outsource some of the payment risk. Maybe they're using a Signified or a Forter, for example, or they're really looking to the fraud folks to be experts. But what really happens is, these tools are API based, which means there's not really possible to call them at every single step in a customer's journey without slowing that customer down.
That's funny. Yeah.
One challenge. And then the other one is that every single fraud prevention, company essentially says, here's our score, here's what we recommend you should do with it. And then the customer's kind of left with a bag going, well, how do I stitch together all of these different signals? Because they're not always from one single provider. As I said, they might be getting some bot detection up, stream, and the security, then maybe security owns that piece. Maybe they do own the authentication, maybe they don't. But at the end of the day, what they want to be able to have fine-grained control of is the user's experience in a risk-measured way, and to do it at the least cost and the most efficient and the most performance with the least amount of impact to that user's journey. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, aspiring to get to the holy grail of being able to be dynamic and being able to change, because there's no fraud tool that will solve every problem now and in the future. It's always an iterative game, but engineering is the single largest bottleneck for every single risk initiative for every customer I talk to. It's like, this is great, we love to try X and Y, but we're booked out for like 18 months, 2 years roadmap. How are we going to squeeze into that? And it's even much harder also. I got a good appreciation of Darwinium. Threatmetrix wasn't so focused on things like abuse and trust and safety, where maybe there is no transaction involved. It's basically exploiting application or business logic or policy logic. And what happens is this tension is that, at least on the fraud side, you can kind of update some rules and kind of change, some of the scores to kind of finesse things a little bit. But when you're dealing with some of these more business logic or business, threats and abuse threats, is that there's this continual competition where it's actually the application itself that might have to be updated. And so, and the application teams always have something else to do and build. And so your trusted safety team's like, we know what we need to do. It's just getting it somehow to get it done. So it's a real challenge. So, number one was that everyone's deployed, in terms of challenges I talk to, challenges that customers come to me with is they've deployed one of everything. Engineering is the single biggest bottleneck. And the third one is really a macroeconomic piece, which is based on recession and a lot of companies being laid off. And, a lot of people are being asked, how do we do more with less? And that comes down to both tool sets, like how to, can we get vendor consolidation? But it also comes down to the fact that if you look at this organization, and right now there still are two camps. There is security and fraud.
Yep,
and
that's correct.
Everywhere you go, there are still two camps, right? But at the end of the day, they're all really, and I'm talking about customer facing, our application security, site security, they're all trying to achieve the same thing, which is how do we protect our customers? How do we keep their data safe? And how do we protect our reputation? And how do we, protect our revenue? They're just seizing different parts of the elephant, And so what we're also seeing as part of this trend is that, they need to work closely together. And many organizations, actually, fraud is starting to, and in terms of e-commerce, report into security. And that can be different ways depending on the different industries. But I guess the takeaway point, though, is that fraud and security can no longer work as separate islands if we're going to solve.
Yeah, and I think over the last, I've done a couple of panels, definitely talking about that and how to communicate with your security team internally if you're not already, and that if you're not already, like you need to be. And how, like I've said it a couple of times here on this podcast, like me internally at my company, I meet with my security team every other Thursday. I meet with them, and we both just, all we do is we have an hour booked. We don't always use it, but we just get on there and we say, these are our projects. What are your projects? What are you trying to solve? What is what we're trying to solve? And so much there's overlap into that. Like even doing like this like a customer authentication is a great thing, like it's not necessarily solving the identity of the customer, but it's authenticating the customer as they log into your site. And those are projects that I think a lot of people are trying to like figure out right now, because it's how do you let people log into your site without 2FAing them if you don't have to, without doing a CAPTCHA? Like how do you get people in there? How can you validate their identity passively? And the fraud teams seem to be working on the same thing that the security teams seem to be working on. So you really need to be communicating on all the little things, because you never know. And it's the same thing. Like if the fraud team might be saying like all these purchases are coming on bots. Okay, great. You might be seeing and have all this bot traffic isolated, but if you haven't told your security team, they haven't been able to tune like the perimeter models, like things like Perimeter X or any stuff that's coming in through like your Cloudflare, your Akamai, to try and actually stop those bots up front. But if you share that information, you might even be able to kill that completely upstream. So communication, everybody, communication.
That's perfect, and that's a good segue. And I didn't actually, we didn't stage that talk, but that actually
that's how good I am.
For sure. But look, you hit the nail on the head. Actually, was one of the key crucial problems today. So it's not stopping from automated attack. It's not solving from manual human attacks. It's for all of the above. And what happens today, by and large, is security team, deploys some automation protection tools. Might be CAPTCHA, might be bot detection. The problem is that those tools, while they're good at inspecting traffic and devices, I know them very well, they have zero customer transactional behavioral context. Zero, zilch, none. And even sometimes to the point where you're saying you want to share data. Like fraud will go, hey, look, there's the card number that they was fraudulent. And then they will go, well, how do I key an IP, card number into my bot detection? I can't. It doesn't have the same.
Yeah, you don't know what they're trying to buy, what they're attacking. They're always going after this one specific PS5 or this one specific thing of protein. Like
and then fraud on the other
information.
Side. Fraud on the other side. The biggest challenge we had at Threatmetrix was actually bots, in the sense that you're there at the downstream, you're at the behest of what's upstream, and maybe you're not getting the full signals, or maybe you're lucky enough to be getting past a bot score, but none of the context, and that was one of the things that we also pioneered at Threatmetrix, was to make sure there was full visibility, not just the score, but what were the attributes and the signals. And so you've got these two camps, two birds of a feather that never flock together, and you need something new, basically, to be able to stitch across all of that intelligence. So something that's able to scale, like a security tool that can see all your traffic and have full visibility, but then something that actually understands the customer, the transactions, the behavior, and what they're trying to do. And that's why Darwinium. effectively.
I
All
was just gonna say, is that what you guys do? Do you guys do all three of those things?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Darwinium, really saw a lot of the insights that we took from, building Threatmetrix. And then again, when I was running the fraud and identity markets at LexisNexis, was seeing, again, those problems I talked about, one of everything, engineering being the problem, and saying, look, the perfect place to be able to get around this problem is by being situated in the network. Like if you are situated in the network or have access to the traffic streams, and you can make it configurable, then
you get everything.
whack-a-mole. You're able to, change a dial, twist a knob, and all of a sudden you could be scoring someone different. You could be doing it continuously without introducing latency because it's already going through that network. But Darwinium, what we realized is we needed to innovate on multiple areas to pull off this vision of being able to do. And so what does Darwinium do? Well, within 5 minutes, you're able to deploy, get instant visibility across all your customer user journeys, be able to dynamically enrich your existing fraud tools with unique digital signals that turn behavior into identity. It enables you to orchestrate third-party no-code in a way that if you want to try or test different providers, you can do so with ease, enable you to deploy your own or third-party machine learning models continuously across every interaction. And then if you need to take action, you can automate things like, shutting down a traffic source, redirecting to a honeypot, or, initiating and automating a password reset flow, for example. Now, to achieve all the above without requiring any engineering work or effort, being able to go to your site security team and say, press this button and, get away, we had to innovate across multiple fronts. One of them actually was realizing that every company essentially utilizes what's called a CDN, a content delivery network. Yep. And sometimes they use the term the edge to kind of describe that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you questions here because I think I know what a CDN for my audience. Your CDN, content delivery network, is it's Cloudflare, it's Akamai. I mean, does AWS even technically count as a CDN?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they have CloudFront. We have a fantastic integration and implementation with them. So CDN is that. And then, the term edge came about because, a lot of these providers were saying, look, we've got all these servers everywhere. They can do more than just serve images to, make that serve images faster. We've actually got a general compute program, and that's been termed the edge, as opposed to, AWS data centers, which typically is focused in a given region. The edge typically has lots of points of presence closest to your customers, so that if you're going to make a decision, that's the place where you want to do it. Now, there are many innovations that we had to do to implement on the edge versus via the edge. So what do I mean by that? So,
yes, please.
So
you're doing all the questions for me. You're doing the questions and the answers. I'm just sitting back on cruise control over here.
Maybe I've had a bit of practice. I don't know.
I guess so.
But, it is, if you look at your security, let's take, what people might be familiar with, so let's say your bot detection solution. So, there are many good ones out there, Shape Security is obviously one of them, Perimeter X you mentioned. Actually, there's a great startup, Casada, that came out of Australia.
I've seen them, yeah.
But, essentially, a lot of these, they rely on an architecture it's called like a gateway or reverse proxy. And so essentially what happens is you redirect, typically via your CDN, to say, hey, this portion of traffic or all of it goes through this network that effectively proxies this traffic and then redirects it back to your website. That's how those bot detection solutions work. They look at the traffic, they run algorithms and analysis, and have ways and tools of being able to dynamically update that, etc. So that was all well and good for what they were designed for, but there is a different way, and I'm humble instead of saying a better way, but there is a different way, which is
just real quick to I think some of the questions, because I've talked to other companies that do no code, low code things, but they usually deploy at the CDN level. But usually the question that comes up with, that I've been on a couple of the calls from the security teams, is, do we have to route all of our DNS through you? And that seems to scare people. So yeah, because you go from your own DNS and how the load bearing that you're going to be putting on your CDN when you're routing traffic there. So all of a sudden you're rerouting it through somebody else. Are they going to be able to handle it? And then if they have other companies your same size or bigger, and there's a bunch of them, then what happens? Like, what happens if they go
No, so
down?
I think that's legitimate, and that actually was why we designed. I agree with you, security team.
Excellent. That's good. They'll be happy to know that.
Yeah. So essentially, the big difference is what Darwinium does is we process on the edge, not via the edge. So when I say that, what that means is rather than redirect your traffic to another network or to an intermediate network that kind of processes your traffic before handing it off back to your servers, we actually process the request on your CDN. So no traffic goes to Darwinium through Darwinium. Everything is processed on your own infrastructure, because I agree with you that Darwinium we've built to scale to be something hopefully that has 10x bigger impact than Threatmetrix, even if we're successful, is recognizing the fact that maybe some industries that's fine for, and if you have urgent use cases like bot detection, maybe they make allowances for it, but certainly banks and others, it's a hard sell. Typically they say no, you have to do it on premise, which kind of then again defeats the whole, hey, how do we make this easy and deploy with 5 minutes? So we spent a lot of our time, the first 2 years, really architecting and pioneering this processing decisioning on the edge. So no data gets routed through us. Effectively what we're doing, every time a request comes in, Darwinium's code runs, which your security team, by the way, unlike third-party JavaScript, has the ability to scan, to deploy, have full control over when changes happen. That's number one. They love to hear that. Because that is, one of the compromises we had to make for, being able to share intelligence around devices. But, that whole point of third-party, profiling really is starting to go away, because people are even starting to question what's the value of device sharing intelligence when effectively all the browsers and all the iOS, manufacturers are making it impossible to share data.
Yeah, they are putting a lot of walls up on things. And I think that that's where, you see like even more rudimentary device ID companies, like it's getting harder for them to make unique devices, because you get an out of the box iPhone, you put your Facebook, your Instagram on there, like it looks like everybody else's iPhone at the end of the day. There's no more like driving in how many pictures are on there, what the battery percentage is, how many unread emails, like those things the walls are up now. So it's harder to differentiate individual users, because iPhone 15's running the newest 16.4 just looks like iPhone 15 running 16.4 at the end of the day to everybody else.
Yeah, and the shields are up, like I mean, they say it's privacy is one of the reasons, but the backhanded side of that is they already got the distribution, so they've already can first party, identify most people. So they have that advantage. So, but the core thing here is, and the message to your listeners is there is a different, better way, I think, to be able to get full visibility, do that within a 5-second or 5-minute deployment, depending on your organization, get full visibility without the risk of routing traffic through something else, which can be, the challenge is, and look, you've got many companies, they're well established, they've got compliance, blah, 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 but, sending any of your traffic through, you've got to trust their security. You've got to trust that there is no malicious actor. You've got to hope that they're as resilient as your CDN provider. And we all know that, Akamai, Cloudflare, and AWS, they still go down. And so, it's less of a stretch. So we had to innovate on that. So we needed to make sure that we could run on the edge, closest to your customer. No traffic goes through us, and the security team has complete control. That was number one. Secondly, we had to innovate around data and how data is collected. So, one of the things I'm proud of with Threatmetrix is that we build, a pseudo-anonymous device identity and device intelligence digital identity company. That meant, we could correlate and say on a global basis, hey, have we seen this device with this email before? When I say have we seen it, to Threatmetrix, it was just all strings and and hashes and encrypted text. It wasn't something that we could actually reverse engineer, but we could at least help use those as signals. But those still kind of rely on passing data to a vendor, any fraud vendor with a shared network, and then hope that they encrypt it and hash it as as
I see. You should see my agreements that I have, my DPAs that I have with the vendors that I use. They're insane on how much encryption we require, and the what happens if they don't too.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
fallout from that.
Exactly. So, I want to be the first don't trust us company, like you don't have to and shouldn't trust us. Why? Because we've built the necessary connections control. So because we run at the edge, one of the things we're able to do is encrypt all the data and do any of the anonymization, et cetera, that we need to do within your company's own infrastructure. That means before a single byte of data gets sent to Darwinium, so any of the data that's extracted that you ask for us to analyze on your behalf is pre-encrypted, pre-hashed, pre-anonymized per your own security policies. You're able to rotate your keys. You're able to do all those sorts of things without having to trust Darwinium. And the other benefit that provides is that you can store all of that data encrypted within your own environment. Darwinium has made a number of innovations to how our portal and our application and decision engine works. So your data actually stays within your environment. We don't touch any data that's PII encrypted or not, stays within your control. So
interesting. That's saving you on database storage.
Well, I mean, we're happy. We can do it, obviously, for SMBs or anyone that wants us to. But by and large, we're dealing with the biggest and the best in the industry, and that's something that they've definitely cottoned onto. So previously, the thing I wanted to achieve was not have to compromise. How do you get rid of the compromise you typically make? So to get full visibility, typically you had to either install a reverse proxy or a trusted third party's reverse proxy network. That's a compromise. You wanted to get shared intelligence from fraud prevention, so you had to pass on the data. That's a compromise. When Darwinium, actually, the first thing we created was a VPC, something that could be fully installed by an organization within their own control, so within their own environment, right? They could run all of Darwinium within their own environment. And, that's just a huge mistake. When I say a huge mistake, we did it deliberately because, that was some of the, larger organizations we were targeting, but it's costly for the organization to run this stuff. You can't get scale from having multiple organizations. That it just makes everything, harder to support that customer. So what we've done with Darwinium is we've separated what's called the data plane from the control plane. The customers have full control over their data, and that data does not leave their infrastructure. They're the PII and the sensitive data that they need to control. And then, Darwinium takes care of all the stuff, the machine learning, all these sorts of things that you need to get done to be able to have a, full configurability, at will at any time, at any point in the user's journey.
So one of the questions that I'm going to have for you then is you say at any point in the user's journey, which I think, like, coming back to what you said a lot earlier about the policy abuse, for me specifically, and for I think a lot of my peers, like, policy abuse is very much on our minds. We see more dollars walking out the doors, I think, a lot of times than on policy abuse, and it's like flagrant, and like those are the things that, like, a lot of people don't like. So we spent the last 20 years putting, JavaScript tags on checkout, and then we put it on login, then we put it on account create. But now we have these other things. Like, I think for me, I've always put them on gift card testing, like code testing and all that to limit that. But there's other things now too. There's, like, if you have games on your site, if you have any sort of interaction on your site, if you have any sort of changes on your site where, like, you can change data. Like, I think a big indicator that we see a lot is, like, on ATOs, is we see people log into an account and they immediately change the address, and it's not anywhere near where they used to be, so we see those sorts of things happening. So we would need to have something like, now a check at address change, or check it email change, like those are the things. So is that what you're talking about? Can you tell me a little bit about
what we
can do?
Yeah, that's sure. Because we're processing this data as it comes in, we can do multiple things. We can extract fields and attributes, to send to third-party APIs or process them in our own machine learning to build signals. We can dynamically inject content. So, things like third-party JavaScript. We've built a number of integrations with different fraud providers and companies that provide, things like device intelligence and et cetera. That can be dynamically interjected anywhere else. So that's, and you have many companies that might be using a provider at the payment side of things. And, we desperately love to deploy that across different points, but, IT is still an issue. But it goes beyond just injecting a piece of JavaScript. When you get down to some of this policy abuse, it can be things like, now they're waiting 5 seconds before they press the invite button and inviting 10 people, right? And then now it's actually they're waiting 20 seconds and they're inviting 3 people, and it's so that's what I mean by, a lot of this abuse happens, but it's tightly integrated to how the application works. Like if you have to go to the engineering team to say, hey, can you hide this button or only enable X amount of invites per se, or only you're fighting a losing battle. And so that's one of the ways that Darwinium can certainly help with, for sure.
I see you have on the notes here. I'm just going to prompt you right for it because I'm curious, because it's something that I've seen happen for a decade. No such thing as unknown sessions. Is that like, tell me all about that and tell all of us about that, because I think we all struggle with that. And obviously I probably already know, because you deploy at the edge, that there's no way to not go. There's just no way to not get in there unless you're going through that endpoint at the end of the day.
That's very true. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. So just for the listeners, that may not be familiar with unknown sessions, basically for any device intelligence, fraudsters, there's what's called, an unattachment rate, which might be, single digit percentage of your transactions that have no device intelligence associated with it. But that I've seen it as high as 30 and 40% in different environments, and so that really kind of calls into question the value that it's adding if you're able to get around it.
Yeah.
So
what's the point of having a tool if you can't profile half your customers? You have that much exposure,
So the symptoms is, okay, you see kind of unidentified devices for a great amount of traffic, but what's the causes? So there's a variety of causes. One of them is latency. Sometimes if you're serving, across customers across the globe, they might be on bad networks. That profiling data might take a while to detect and record and to ship it back to the mothership, if you like. So that's one reason. Another reason is, just people using privacy conscious, third-party JavaScript blockers. There's ways that you can get around it, but by and large, you're not helped by the actual browsers and OS manufacturers themselves, which are actively blocking third-party, data and collection within that. So that could be just, to do with the operating system. And then the third, obviously, is just a malicious actor trying to seize that, hey, there's a connection going off to a remote IP address, I can block that. So Darwinium, okay, so how do we address that? And why do I say no sessions? Well, one is performance. When a piece of JavaScript is injected, we have our own proprietary data collection as well as being able to collect, do that for your best of breed providers as well. That actually gets served with the page. So by the time it arrives to the user, it's already done. There's no kind of waiting there. And you don't have any of those latency effects. So, some companies sometimes introduce maybe a couple of seconds delay to make sure they can collect all the signals they need to do.
I've seen that. I've seen redirects and all of those things. Yeah.
So that goes away. And then the second thing is third-party JavaScript. I mentioned earlier that one of the trade-offs when we were going to customers made when deploying something like a Threatmetrix is that we had this third-party piece of JavaScript on their website, but the compromise was that, hey, we could share this intelligence and we could be more, more effective. Darwinium, one of the ways we bypass that challenge is that we actually profile from your IP address. So all the profiling happens from your infrastructure. It doesn't come via Darwinium. It goes directly from that end user's device to your organization. Again, this is a big difference. Security loves it. From a user's perspective, privacy, way more private, and fraudsters hate it because there's no legitimate reason why that should be blocked. And the browser manufacturers see it as being profiling coming from that in your organization. So that's some of the ways that we deploy our own profiling.
Yeah. So how's it going?
It's great. I mean, as I said earlier, we feel very much like where Threatmetrix was when it's first moved over and launched into the US. So this is our third year. The first year was building and getting customer feedback. Second year was getting early customers on board and expanding globally. We have 24-hour support. We're based in the US, UK, and Australia, and actually soon to be adding to the Netherlands as well.
Wow.
And then this year really is just consolidating on those initial early adopters, and the feedback that we got from the Merchant Risk Council and other things that we've done is showing that now is the right time. People I think were sitting at the on the fence a little bit last year. There are some other cool companies that are doing some cool things. Kind of get the message out about user journey orchestration. And now it just seems like the time is right. Our pipeline is 10x in the last few months. So I
think people are opening up to like their new we've been sitting and we've been inside for so many years, and we're finally starting to get back out there. You know, I know it's been open for a year and a half or so, but a lot of people, like, I mean, a lot of people, even at this most recent Merchant Risk Council, that was like their first conference back. And they're starting to see, you know, they've been getting hit with all these new trends. They've been playing the whack-a-mole for the past 3 years while we've all been inside. So now they're finally starting to see what new products are out there, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's things that are solving for what I'm doing. So now they're curious. I mean, some companies are still spending money. I know based on the layoff data that I'm seeing, you know, not everybody is, but I mean, I think it's a really good spot. So I think it's a really good spot for you guys with a really emerging technology to be where
Yeah.
you're at right now. What else are you
Yeah.
guys working on? Are you guys working on more?
Well, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think I mean, one Gartner, many of your listeners will be Gartner clients. You know, they have a piece on user journey, or they call it journey time orchestration. I'm not 100% in love with the term, because what I described is more than just orchestrating API. It's about having full visibility, enhancement, and enrichment, which we call, you know, our digital signatures. Yes, orchestration and decisioning, but there's also remediation. That's really the journey that our customers go on. First is the light bulb gets switched on with visibility, then looking to enrich what they already have, you know, with these digital signals, and then, you know, orchestration and third-party, you know, APIs is kind of the step that kind of it goes after that. But so what are we working on? Well, I mean, really the founding, while we say, you know, we're a risk-based user orchestration company providing continuous customer protection, what we're really building at Darwinium is the self-driving car of cybersecurity and fraud
I
prevention.
like that. That's a good way to put that. I like that.
You know, and really, and people have heard me and know me long enough, have been listening to me saying, hey, look, AI is going to change, you know, the way that we need, you know, the way that both attacks get done, but we also need to be able to seize on what AI can do for defense. Now, if you were building, and this is what I thought to myself, was if you were going to build the next generation fraud and cybersecurity company, what would you do? Well, what you would do is you would build both, not just machine learning, you know, models and AI for the defense. You would also build simulations for attacks as well.
That's
So
cool.
essentially, the way that it's,
That's
yeah, I
cool.
mean, you know, we own customersimulation.com, fraudsimulation.com, cybersecuritysimulation.com. You know, all of those domain names is basically where we see where the puck is going. So essentially, why is ChatGPT so effective? Why are deep fakes so effective? I mean, by and large, the technology it changes, but essentially what it is machines training machines. You have, you know, things like Midjourney and others that, you know, you can type in you know, some text and it generates some beautiful art for you. How those work is you have one machine that's trying to fool the other one, and the other one's trying to detect it, and they get a little cookie, or the different, you know, the digital equivalent, an electron maybe, that then helps them self-train each other. And the difference between humans training machines, which typically can take days, weeks, or months, is that these machines can run multiple learning cycles. You know, a human, multiple millions of human lives can be run, you know, in a day or a week.
That's
That's why
so
that's,
cool. I think that, like, you know, I like, spoiler alert, everybody, I have heard this before. And that was like the big thing that really stood out for me personally, was
yeah,
that I think is something that, like, nobody else that I know is actually doing those simulations like that. And I think
yeah.
that that's really, really freaking cool. So
Yeah, I mean
good job on that.
that's certainly. I mean, certainly we can't just enter and talk to customers and say, "Guess what? We're doing this," because, you know, most of the times when you say you're actually an AI company, people laugh you out the building, you know, based on the previous failed, you
Yeah.
know, tool that they
I've,
thought was going to solve the world. But
I've
you
heard
know,
that pitch a million times, that silver bullet coming in.
yeah, actually, you know, and so actually we're risk.ai, you know, as one of, you know, one of the, you know, first domain names we had. So yeah, but once we heard there was a people won't accept the message. But seriously, that's underneath the hood is what we're building is, you know, just where, you know, Threatmetrix, one of its kind of moat, if you like, was, you know, having the largest kind of shared intelligence around digital identities. For Darwinian, the moat will actually be shared, or, you know, models that actually understand more than they currently do today on the very limited basis that they do it, and do it before our adversaries, which are nation states, do it themselves. And, you know, when people are hearing AI, and again, you know, I don't like to be too negative and down, you know, towards the end of our time here on the podcast, but people need to have their eyes open that What we're attempting to build to defend against, our adversaries are building to attack us with. Using machine learning and AI to simulate effectively whole entire populations of folks with their, facial biometrics, with their keystroke biometrics, with their voice biometrics. All of that is up for grabs, and it's a real arms race. That's the ride we're on.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think what you guys have built, and I've been watching you guys for a few years now, and then to see it really out there and see what you guys are doing, see the team you've built, like it's pretty impressive. I like it. I think it's like you got some folks from the old days together there, don't you now?
Yeah. Threatmetrix, was the best. One of the best things about Threatmetrix was the camaraderie in the teams, and people, we're kind of some of the best there. And I kind of got the best of the best of the best. I got the band together, and and that's really, we know that's really where a lot of confidence comes from, and the confidence that a lot of customers have given us is the fact that we've been there, we've done it, we know what to build, we know why to build, and we know the 10 things that you don't realize you need once you get through step one. That's the experience the team has, and I can't be prouder of the culture, and it's worth spending just just 1 minute on that. But
yeah, I agree.
We're three H's. We're hungry, so everyone has high ambitions, high plans, wants to see the world to be a better place, and understand that there's a lot of work that need to be done, but enjoys that hard work. They're humble, so to a T, and if any of your listeners hear anything other than that from anyone at Darwinium, I would personally like to know that, we're humble, we're team players, that the best idea wins, not who says it the loudest or where they sit in a hierarchy. The best idea always wins, and we're humble and realize you need a team. Teamwork makes the dream work. As the saying,
it does.
And the third one, the other H, is we hold ourselves to high integrity. You should expect that from anyone that you interact with at Darwinium. You'll get the straight skinny, the full story. As they say in Australia, play the straight bat, as a cricket analogy that probably will be lost.
No. I don't know. I got a lot of Australian listeners, actually. I do.
There you go. So that would be my final kind of closing statement. So, that's what I hope you would expect from dealing with anybody across Darwinium from the top to the bottom.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for your time. I know it's early in the afternoon over there, and the waves are probably calling. But I've been wanting to have you on here for a while to talk about this, and I'm really happy that we were able to connect during the MRC. I know we were going to try and record it at the MRC. We both had lost our voices a little bit and had to enjoy the Ethica party a little more. So, we made it happen. I'm really happy that you were able to share the story and share what you guys are working on. I'm going to obviously put all links to everything in the description of this. Make sure that you're tagged in all the posts, that your company's tagged in all the posts. I really encourage all my listeners, if anything in this really struck a chord with you, or if you had any sort of curiosities about what they do, to really reach out to them. They're more than happy to jump on, show you what they do. They, like he said, they have an excellent team of people that are more than willing to spend the time to understand what you're looking for and really show you their product. So yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to visit my friends at Spec, who just happen to be this quarter's sponsors. Their patented Trust Cloud platform can help you orchestrate the future of your fraud and payments journey for a quick and easy no-code implementation. It's really quite impressive. See it for yourself at www.specprotected.com today and ask for a demo on your very own site. Thanks again for listening.